Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I'm a gal on a mission to assemble a cadre of thinkers, writers, and teachers who care about analog books and want to keep small booksellers' businesses alive. I believe that the world of publication can be transformed one personal connection at a time. And so I'm a co-founder of LPC, a Lilliputian publishing co-op, which I'm founding with Victoria Crowder and Quentin Payne. If you're interested in knowing what's going on there, you can join my mailing list right here, KathleenSpracklin.com. And what's more, I'm writing a book, Writing with Emotion, how to inspire your readers and get them to remember what you write forever. Well, this podcast is just an informal gathering where I get to talk to you about what I'm reading because I like to continue to read deeply in my field of interest, which is an understanding of human emotion and what drives people to do what they do, how they handle the forces in their lives, and exploring it through the medium of fictional characters. So I've been reading for some time a pretty giant book. And when I say I've been reading it for some time, I must tell you that I'm not all that far in it because I start by looking at the whole book, the index of topics, the index of names, the table of contents, because I like to get a feel for a book. And this one is quite amazing because it has a huge number of contributors and it cites an enormous number, 26 pages of names who are cited in the text. So it's really, really comprehensive and it's right in my field. So I'm very excited to be working with that. So I wanted to share with you today a main card that I made for my Zettelkasten. This is Zeke over here, my Zettelkasten. He's an anti-net Zettelkasten, and that means that it's an analog Zettelkasten. It's made of physical cards, and it has a numeric alpha numbering system. And we say numeric alpha, not alphanumeric. Now, I'm a computer programmer, so I know alphanumeric. But here's the deal. Most of what you have in the numbering system are numbers. Alphabetic characters show up, but it's mostly numbers. So we say numeric alpha. And it's tree structured. That's where the T in anti-net comes from. And it's indexed. And the index is hugely important. So what I'm going to do through this podcast as I go along is just dribble a little bit of information about how my anti-net Zettelkasten is coming along. So if you're interested in it, you can get a feel for why I am so excited about this tool and why it means so much to me in the work that I'm doing. So today I was working with, see these little 3, 4, that's page number in this book. I got a long ways to go. This book is over 700 pages. So page 3 and 4 is not particularly impressive. But one of the things that did amaze me about it was that it was talking about the need for a common vocabulary among psychologists that talks about a vocabulary of strength. And it was comparing it to the fact that we've had for a long time a vocabulary of illness, psychological illnesses, but not a vocabulary of strength. And I noted down some of the reasons why the author felt that would be particularly important, and I tended to agree as well. But having made that notes on my bib card, which I've explained in the past, and this is my first main card that I've made from the book. It's got the nickname I gave the book and where the reference came from and the notes I made. Well, that's not an entire main card. Main cards are the main body of what goes into the Zettelkasten. But this is just the beginning of a main card because a Zettelkasten is a connector of ideas. And that is just one set of ideas from 2 pages of one book. It's not a Zettelkasten entry yet. The next thing that I need to do to make this into a real main card is that I've got to take a look at what it goes to. And so I'm going to be looking it up in the index. And the index is where I found a tantalizing entry to something that was a main card that has already existed in my book that was talking about a vocabulary of emotions. Well, the vocabulary of emotions is very, very closely connected to the kind of work I do to try to help fiction writers create believable characters. And I found this card through the index, but if you notice, it comes out of the section on building a character profile, which is the tool I use. And then it comes all the way down to this group of classification systems, down to this particular main card, which I'm talking about how and why you want to understand a vocabulary of emotions. Because if you don't have a vocabulary of emotions that you're speaking to when you write, then you're just writing your emotions based on instinct. I could do a whole talk on that, and maybe I will at some point. But the point is that there's a vocabulary of emotions, and now I have over here a vocabulary of character strength. And they seemed very, very closely connected. So one of the things that I like to do is when I place the new card, I chose to give it a number here that comes right after this number, because they connect so well. And so what I've connected them with was a realization that absent a common vocabulary in treating people, then psychologists are forced to treat people on instinct, just the way writers without a common vocabulary of human emotions are forced to write based on index. So now I had a card that went into my system. But something else about this was definitely nagging me, and I put it together with a thought that occurred to me from a recent newsletter which I had, which was on perspective. And so it made me realize that what I was looking at in these two cards was a comparison of the same situation based on two different perspectives. But when the psychologist talks about human strengths, they're talking about how people are, what are their states of being. When a fiction writer is talking about emotion, they're talking about how people act and the choices that they made. It made me realize these were the same spaces, but coming at it from the perspective of a psychologist versus a fiction writer. And as a fiction writer, we have to deal with a triad of emotions, and I won't have time in this podcast to go into that. I'll do that at another time. But you have this emotional struggle, three different emotions that connect to each and every character trait, and that gives you the emotional state that you're writing with. So the fiction writer has a common vocabulary of emotions. The psychologist needs a common vocabulary of character strengths. But we have to always be aware when we're looking at those two things that we're looking at being versus behaving, and the key to that was perspectives. So now I have to be careful about where I got my ideas, and my idea on perspective was from a recent email newsletter from this fellow, Justin Berriot. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. And you can reach his newsletter through this address, justinberriot.com. And he had some very interesting thoughts on perspective that gave me that additional insight. So now what I wanted to point to sum this whole thing up is to say that when you're creating an entry in a Zettelkasten, you're taking a new idea, you're bouncing it against a different idea, and then that pulls something in from your memory and from something you recently read, and you end up with a complete and very interesting set of ideas that then turned into a journal entry for me where I expanded all of these thoughts. And that's why they say that a Zettelkasten makes you a writing machine. And what happens is these ideas explode in your mind, and you want to share them so badly that you've got to write them, you've got to get them out to the world and share them. So thank you. And that is all for today. Bye-bye.